on the AmericasBroadcastNetwork.com. Thank you for listening.
Hey, good morning, everybody. Joe Gavalis with the Safe Senior Hour. I hope you all had a great weekend. Good morning, everybody. Joe Gavalis with the Safe Senior Hour. I hope you all had a great weekend. Good morning, everybody. Joe Gavalis with the Safe Senior Hour.
You're listening to America's Web Radio on the AmericasBroadcastNetwork.com. Thank you for listening.
Good morning, everybody. Again, Joe Gavalis with the Safe Senior Hour. I hope you'll enjoy our show today. We've got a very special guest. Again, Joe Gavalis. Brad Schrade from the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. Brad, are you on? Can you hear me?
Yes, Joe, I can hear you.
Yeah, we're just trying to get everything all set up here. And Brad, we appreciate you being on. Again, the Safe Senior Hour, we always start off every show by saying elder abuse does not report itself. And we address basically three areas of elder abuse that we kind of identified: physical, financial, institutional. And I just want to thank you for all the fine work you have done on the institutional side here of protecting Georgia's vulnerable workers. I think your articles are called, I think, Unprotected Broken Promises in Georgia's Senior Care Industry. So we thank you for bringing this to the attention of everybody. So
Thanks, Joe.
I'm glad you're on, and I think everybody needs to know Brad's background, so I'm going to let him explain, but we're very honored. He is a well-seasoned investigative reporter, and that he goes into depth on various issues, and he's worked in Nashville and Minnesota, I think. And you did win a 2013 Pulitzer Prize for work as a team in the Minneapolis Star-Tribune concerning breakdown of deaths in the state's child care system. So you're well-versed in investigative reporting, and we certainly appreciate you on. So if you can give us a little your background, a little more, and type of cases you worked before we start talking about our elder abuse investigative reports that you've done.
Sure. I've been a journalist, a reporter for more than 2 decades. Sort of got my start, the old-fashioned way. Worked at a relatively small paper, the Augusta Chronicle, then the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, then the Nashville Tennessean, Minneapolis Star-Tribune, and then I moved back to the AJC in Atlanta about 5 or 6 years ago. I got into, covered a variety of beats: cops, education, state government, city hall. I mean, sort of done it all in the metro paper realm, and started getting into investigative reporting more exclusively when I was at the Nashville Tennessean, and have worked, done a lot of investigations. Usually what we tend to do is in these kinds of stories is look at some kind of system, oftentimes in the state, that's maybe not working the way it should, and try to sort of take it apart in the different pieces and explain what is not working, what should be happening, and usually there's the best kinds of investigative stories involve some sort of harm to the public or to individuals, and that's sort of how we work. The series that we are in the middle of right now is a classic case of that, where we started, colleagues of mine actually started last year sort of with the question of these you see these assisted living facilities popping up everywhere in Georgia, particularly in Metro Atlanta. These are the very nice looking, shiny new facilities that they're marketing heavily to seniors, and they have the gourmet chefs and the wonderful facades and the wonderful large fireplaces in the lobbies, and they look wonderful, and they're a place that is increasingly becoming where a lot of seniors and their families are turning to for assisted care when a loved one needs it. And so we wanted to sort of understand these better and understand what is the services that are being delivered and how are they doing. And what we found was that it's very difficult in Georgia to get much information about these facilities, in part because the state regulators, the Department of Community Health, had a website that was often not updated and, very, very difficult to find and navigate. And a lot of people, including some in the industry, didn't even know the website existed. And so we started doing public records requests and got thousands of regulatory records and started looking at them. And what we found was quite shocking and disturbing, the amount of neglect and abuse, and in some cases death, that was happening in these in this system. There's about 400 of these large assisted living and personal care homes across Georgia, and so we just really wanted to sort of understand that system and how it's working. And what we found was quite shocking and disturbing.
Do we have I just wanted to get a feel, as you know, the show goes throughout the United States and all over the world, and just get an idea that do we have a population universe of how many people would be using these assisted living or personal care homes? And I want to draw the comparison because I believe your article clearly states, basically that the state is understaffed in their inspectors and
yeah. To be clear, Joe, we looked at the Georgia system, but a lot of what we found is applicable in any state in the country. Some are better regulated than others, but this industry is really a national, in many cases, a national industry. That what has happened is in the over the last 20, 30 years, people have started to, rightfully so, people don't want to end up in a nursing home. And so the private pay sector has moved in and offered these services, and they, in many ways, they are very appealing. It's usually it's somebody, oftentimes somebody might have dementia or the beginnings of dementia or some other health condition that they need assistance, and the family can't provide it, or it becomes too much for it requires a full-time caregiver. And so families all over the country are turning to these kinds of facilities, and there's a very robust industry that's emerged, the senior care housing industry, that has moved into this sector, and these are $4,000, $5,000, $6,000 a month facilities, and you have large operators. There's in every most states. Brookdale is a big operator here in Georgia, but they've got 800 facilities across the country. Some of it's independent living, but about half, I think, is assisted living. You've got Five Stars, another major operator here in Georgia, but they're in many states. And then you have regional operators. I mean, we have Arbor Company here in Georgia, but they're in other states. So there's this whole industry that is been anticipating the baby boomers retiring, and you've seen a flood of investment go into this sector, and they are, people are basically profiting from the graying of America, or trying to. And, in many cases they are providing good care, but there are, in Georgia anyway, we found that it's sometimes hard to tell whether there's good care being provided. So we moved in to look at this, and we created a website with thousands of regulatory records for all 400 facilities in Georgia. And if for people that are listening in Georgia, you can go to ajc.com/unprotected, and you can do a facility search in your area. If you have a loved one that is in need of these services, or you have one that's already in the facility, you can go look at our website and see the regulatory record. We found about 20% or so of the facilities in Georgia had a pattern of violations that were troubling, and we flagged them. About 20% of the facilities we flagged on our website as, if you see this, you might want to give it a deeper look. There are other problems as well. There are some facilities that didn't necessarily get flagged that have some troubling incidents, but again, we just felt like this information is not out there for the public in a very user-friendly way, and we wanted to change that.
Yeah,
and
Brad,
we've heard from a lot of families that said, "Boy, I wish I'd had this information when we were looking."
Right. I want to really commend you all for doing that. I looked at that website, and what I like, in Georgia, it is the mandatory reporters. You must report abuse, neglect, all sorts of issues to the appropriate state regulatory authority, which would be Adult Protective Service for individuals or the healthcare facilities regulators. But in Georgia, you also must report to your local law enforcement. And I love about your website, not only do you have the regulatory reports, you also have attempted to get police incidents at these locations. And that really gives you a much better picture of what is going on. And that was wonderful. I thought that was very significant.
Well, thanks, Joe. Yeah, one of the things that was really interesting to us was, we initially got the inspection reports, which usually, it's a state regulator. There's either a regular annual or every 15-month inspection where they go out, and then there will be complaints that they go out and investigate. And so we had that universe, and that was real troubling, some of the things we found. And then we requested police reports at these facilities, and what we found was oftentimes stuff that was in the police reports had no reflection in the state regulatory records, and it opened up our eyes to realize there are a lot of gaps in the system in Georgia, and I'm sure this is true in other states, where the police might get called to a facility and it doesn't get reported to the state regulators, or the state regulators have an incident and it's not getting reported to police.
Yeah, Brad.
And so it's really, there are a lot of gaps, and we've presented these to some of our findings to some DAs, and they said they had never seen some of these cases.
Oh, I know.
They would have liked to have.
Brad, listen, that's great, and we're going to cover this. We just got to end our first segment, and we'll be right back, and we'll continue this conversation with Brad Schrade with the AJC.
Want to ace your upcoming survey exam? The NLC Prep Combo has everything you need to help you crush your upcoming FS, PS, Florida PSM, California PLS, or Texas RPLS exam. Combos include a full-length practice exam book with the same number of questions and category types as the actual exam, a pre-programmed HP35 with 17 programs to solve those time-consuming equations such as COGO, triangles, traverses, and more in seconds. A complete online course is included that covers every topic of the exam with videos, workbooks, quizzes, and a full-length practice exam that simulates the computer-based format of the FS and PS exam. That gives you not just one, but 2 full-length practice exams to help fully prepare you for test day. Visit us at nlcprep.com for more information and let us help you crush your exams.
This is Ron Camacho, host of the Business Hour, on Fridays from 10 to 11 a.m. Join me as I talk with passionate professionals on a program that profiles the best businesses, business practices, and fascinating business professionals to get an insider view of how America works.
You can keep your doctor, you can keep your plan, and every family will save thousands of dollars a year. I'm Ellen Deal, and if you've been hurt by the Affordable Care Act, you can email MAGA45CAG@gmail.com to see if we can help. Small business owners, individuals, families, and baby boomers, email MAGA45CAG@gmail.com for 3 easy questions to determine if you can get away from Obamacare. I'm a 20-year veteran of the insurance industry and here to help you for all your insurance needs.
You're listening to America's Web Radio on the AmericasBroadcastNetwork.com. Thank you for listening.
Welcome back to the second segment of the Safe Senior Hour. And again, remember, elder abuse doesn't report itself. And we're very honored today to have a reporter from the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, Brad Schrade, who is involved in helping to develop a series on articles that they've had. I think you were saying they have like 8 articles, right, Brad? But you've had a series of articles concerning broken promises in Georgia's senior care industry. So welcome again. Thank you, Brad.
Yes, no, it's great to be here.
We were talking before here about the database that you all developed and you developed it through your investigative reporting, but the database is there to help all citizens of Georgia to try to make a selection or decisions concerning a senior care a lot easier and more informed. Is that right?
Yes. You can go to ajc.com/unprotected and look at our entire series and look at there's a search tool. We also have a consumer guide on that website that is applicable to anybody across the country, in many cases, looking for these kinds of facilities. These are the shiny new facilities, the assisted living facilities you see popping up all over Atlanta and Georgia, and really in just about every city in the country and every community. They're the gleaming new facilities that are promising gourmet chefs and wonderful care and around-the-clock care and memory, in many cases, memory with special memory care units. And a lot of seniors are turning to these to help as they run into health conditions, and there's a great desire to avoid nursing homes. One of the things we found was that this industry is popping up, and many people are going into them that have dementia or Alzheimer's or some other memory issue, and the population that are going into these facilities has more acute health conditions than in some cases these facilities are staffed to handle, and that's where many of the problems that we found in Georgia anyway occurred. It's again, they promise around-the-clock care and that they're going to be there for your loved one whenever a need arises. And in Georgia anyway, the staffing levels at some of these places we found were not really equipped to handle some of the acute conditions and the number of demands on the staff that the residents, and their conditions demanded. And that was where we found many breakdowns in care. One of the findings we found in Georgia, we uncovered 20 deaths that were linked to some sort of problem with care, or the facility was cited for some kind of violation that in a case involving a death. Those were the cases we were able to identify from state records. No one in the state of Georgia's regulatory system tracks deaths, and we actually found many more cases where it looked like a resident died and there was some possible breakdown in care that the regulators didn't necessarily note. So, it's just, there's a lot of, we tried to shine a light into this system. There's a lot of darkness, and one of the things that has been most sort of satisfying about the series so far is the number of family members and even workers in these facilities that we have heard from since we started publishing a few months back, and they said, this is exactly what we've been going through. We've been doing we've been sort of suffering in silence, if you will, but this is exactly our experience. What you're writing about is what we've witnessed. We've been there and seen that there wasn't enough staff to care for our loved one. We've run into the problems where something happened and nobody would investigate. So it really has. We've had a really overwhelming response from readers that makes us realize that we tapped into something that is a whole segment of the senior care business that, at least in Georgia, was not getting the attention that it probably needed.
Well, Brad, this series and your articles are just absolutely wonderful. As you know, I'm the law enforcement coordinator for the North Georgia Elder Abuse Task Force, and we've spoken to over 3,000 seniors and conducted 50 or 60 training with law enforcement, about 600 law enforcement throughout North Georgia. And my point is, when you get down to looking at this, about what can you do to help the citizens of Georgia, and there's two ways. It's like you could try to arrest everybody, but when we raise this issue to people who've been in this business for years, they say education, education, education is the way you're going to help most people. So my hat's off to you doing these series of stories concerning the broken promises in Georgia's senior care industry. I think it's really important to get the message out, and you certainly are doing it. And of course, we always have to say, as you already said, probably the majority, or I think you used the term 20% you had some issues with, but there are many good senior care industries facilities around, which brings up the topic for our new time listeners. If could you give us just kind of a progression of, like, obviously you can have care at home, but what's the next step, and then the next step? Because I think nursing homes are the last one. Can you give us an idea on that for their listeners?
I can. I'll do my best, Joe.
Sure.
What the scenario that often happens that we hear from families is, you've got a loved one, maybe they're having some memory issues, or just some, just
right
senior moments, if you will, or what have you. And a lot of times the families that are entering these places, you're in a crisis, and something has happened that suddenly the care that you've been providing, or that you've been able to help with, is just overwhelming or too much for a family member or a family to handle. One of the cases that we highlighted in the series was a case here in Cobb County, Georgia, where the classic case of the husband, the father had become a widower. He was in another state. He had family here, his adult children. They moved. They were looking for care because they just wanted. He was starting to need that, and they started looking around. And you go to these places and you get a wonderful sales pitch. You're going to hear and you're going to see nice facilities. And the family thought he was in a terrific. They had found a great facility for him, and the place that was going to be a good, and it was near the one of the adult children's homes, so they could go visit regularly. And what they found was that late at night, a caregiver, was allegedly abused him and neglected him, and it eventually led to a murder trial, which is rare. The caregiver was acquitted of murder, but they did find problems. And when you're in a crisis, you have a loved one who's got dementia or has Alzheimer's. Maybe they're wandering from the home. Maybe you're all of a sudden in a crisis, and the system in Georgia was not equipped to give you the information you needed to make maybe the most informed decision. So,
right. Let me just interject on that case. I'm familiar with it because it took place actually in the county I live in, but also dealing with the North Georgia Task Force. It was prosecuted, and as you say, it was unusual to charge a murder charge, but that wasn't the only charge that the individual was charged with. And this gentleman, who apparently had some history at other facilities, was convicted by a jury. I think for abuse,
neglect. I believe it was neglect,
and got sentenced. To serve significant amount of time. I forget what the sentence was. Was it? I think was it to serve 20 to serve 10 or 10, 15 or something like that. But it was not. He was not let out on the street. It just the murder conviction didn't stand. But
yeah, it was not. It wasn't murder. What unfolded in that trial again is the facility itself in some ways, ended up at least being some. I think what happened was evidence was presented that where questions about the facility itself were entered in, and there were instances where the facility wasn't staffed enough. This right. Caregiver, there had been red flags, and we see that across the system in Georgia. It's one of the major findings of our series, and also just something that anybody in senior care industry knows. Staffing is a real problem in this environment. These are caregivers, and in some cases are making barely minimum wage at $10-12 an hour, and you've got a very with a strong economy, facilities are really struggling to staff these places with qualified caregivers, and so in some cases we're finding that they are taking people that probably either have had a history or shouldn't maybe be caregivers, and that's again a nationwide problem. When you read the big national chains, you read their SEC filings and such, they talk about staffing being a real big challenge, and it's going to only get worse because again, the baby boomers are going to start needing this kind of care as they start hitting 80. The amount of care that's going to be demanded in the system is going to be, it's going to be a big challenge.
Well, I certainly couldn't agree with you more, and we're about to take our second break and move on to and end this segment, and then in our third segment we're going to discuss maybe some more specific cases that citizens can look for that they need to report. So with that, that's the end of our second segment of the Safe Senior Hour.
Hello, I'm Dr. Mike Karuchak. Have you ever wondered what doctors talk about amongst themselves? If you do, join us on the Doctor's Lounge and hear the doctors' conversations amongst themselves. Join me and my co-host, Dr. Hal Schertz, every Thursday morning, 8 to 9 a.m.
Perhaps you are struggling to cope with the disease of addiction. If not, you probably know a family member or friend that needs help in battling the cravings and the personal and professional damage done by the effects of drugs or alcohol. Get a pen and paper and be ready to write down the following. These are the issues that the trained staff at the Atlanta Healing Center address and treat every day. Their doctors and counselors with over 40 years of practice in the field of addiction can treat the suffering individual in a thoughtful, compassionate, and experienced manner and guide him or her along the path to recovery. So call 770-696-9862 and speak to a knowledgeable staff member about how you or your loved one can be helped to enjoy a better and healthier life. More information is also available on the website at www.atlantahealingcenter.com.
This is America's Web Radio. Would you like to have a show, talk about your business, or express your opinion on America's Web Radio? Just email gm@americaswebradio.com and we'll get back to you. Thank you.
You can keep your doctor, you can keep your plan, and every family will save thousands of dollars a year. I'm Ellen Deal, and if you've been hurt by the Affordable Care Act, you can email MAGA45CAG@gmail.com to see if we can help. Small business owners, individuals, families, and baby boomers, email MAGA45CAG@gmail.com for 3 easy questions to determine if you can get away from Obamacare. I'm a 20-year veteran of the insurance industry and here to help you for all your insurance needs.
You're listening to America's Web Radio on the AmericasBroadcastNetwork.com. Thank you for listening.
Well, welcome back to the third segment of the Safe Senior Hour, and we have a special guest, investigative reporter for the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, Brad Schrade, who is taking part in writing a series of articles known as the Unprotected, Broken Promises in Georgia's Senior Care Industry, and issues that surround it. And again, welcome back, Brad. I've got just 2 or 3 comments here before we move into some specific examples. One, I want to praise you all for doing this TV show that you did on public broadcasting in Georgia. That was very informative, and I know several people that I've spoken to watched it and were very enlightened by it, and that was about this series, correct?
Yes, yeah, we did a town hall panel with myself and Carrie Teagard and the other reporter who we've been working together on the project, and then we had State Representative Sharon Cooper, Melanie McNeil, the long-term care ombudsman, Jason Marbett, the an elder care specialist, prosecutor in Cobb, and Ginny Helms, who is represents one of the trade groups who is very involved in this.
I want to say it was very enlightening. I've watched it. I actually watched it while you had it. I guess it was on Facebook, and then watched the replay of it. It was very enlightening. To let you know, we've been very fortunate. We've had 3 of the people or 4 of the people you spoke on have been on our show here, doing the same thing you have, helping to educate the public on the issues dealing with senior matters. And with that,
Joe, can I just say one thing real quick?
Sure,
I didn't
sure.
get to.
No, go ahead.
If you are a family member who's going and looking at these places, think about going to. One resource is ajc.com Unprotected. We have a consumer guide, the types of questions you need to ask when you're out looking at these places, and it can apply, across the country. I mean, but the the critical thing is to look under the hood at these places. Don't just be taken in by the nice lobby, the fancy fireplace, the book-lined library. Ask questions about the staffing levels, about regulatory histories. They don't point those kinds of things out on the sales tour, but those are the kinds of critical questions. How long has the head of the facility been there? What's their background? If they were just if they're just new in the job, maybe you might want to ask what happened to the previous administrator. Look beyond the shiny objects and get at the core of the kind of care your loved one is going to receive at any facility, because the marketing and sales tours are going to point out all these wonderful things that, again, look great and they're nice, but the core issues of care, staffing, those kinds of things are really what is going to be critical to make sure your loved one gets the care they deserve.
I agree, and I'm just looking at a couple of your headlines in one of your articles. More than 2 and 5 homes that we're talking about, assisted living and personal care homes, fail to meet training requirements. Yeah, there are requirements out there, but the staff have to have certain training requirements. And the other item I want to mention before you can comment on this here, Brad, is a lot of these homes and assisted living will be keeping residents who are too infirm to be in an assisted living facility or a large personal care home is especially risky, but it's not rare. And then you all make the statement about a third of homes have been cited, this is in Georgia, for having residents who needed a higher level of care, the AJC found. Now, I believe that was Georgia. Was that a national statistic?
No, that was Georgia. Yeah, that was Georgia.
That was Georgia. So right there, it just fills in what you were saying. You have to look in depth. And I think the point that everybody's got to remember, marketing is a great tool, and it's a great use for to bring new business into whatever business you're in. But you're in the business of taking care of your loved one, and that's why you have to go dig deeper into each individual facility. One of the areas we have, I remember one of the cases. It was the home was in a middle income area, had a beautifully mown lawn, landscaped. It was a beautiful home. They took them into it, just exactly what you said. And then this is a little smaller than the ones you looked at, but and they figured, this is going to be a great place for my loved one to be housed, and all the great care. But when it turned out, they actually had them in the basement in bunks, or beds separated by blankets, and horrible facilities for bathing and for personal needs, but you never saw that. And when the loved ones went to look at to go meet with their when the relatives went to go to meet with the loved ones, I'm trying to say, they would go, but they would call and make an appointment. Well, every time they would call and say, this is your lucky day. We're about to go out and go to Wendy's for lunch or someplace like that for lunch. Meet us there. So the message was, you have to independently go in at all hours of the day and look at it. Just don't wait for there's an appointment.
Absolutely. And one of the things, show up at different times. Show up at night to get a sense of what happens at night. Show up, make sure you come on weekends or off hours, because it's time and again what we have heard from families we've talked to, and Joe, you know this, it's the families that are vigilant and on top of being an advocate for their loved one, keeping an eye out, that are the ones that are going to, it's the squeaky wheel that gets the grease. They're going to, if they know you have a loved one that's coming to the facility regularly and going to hold them accountable to make sure that they're doing what they say they're doing, the chances of your loved one getting the care they need and deserve goes up. Now, again, that's not foolproof, but those are the kinds of things that show up unannounced. Show up just unannounced to make sure they're doing what they say they're doing when you're not there.
Well, as I know, as you know, Melanie McNeil, the state ombudsman, and we've had several ombudsmen from around the country on, and they all say show up when it's mealtime, so you can see what they're really eating. That it's just not a show meal. I mean, so you can see what's going on, because a lot of times the residents make complaints about all these issues: meals, personal grooming, how people handle or how they're treated. And I just couldn't concur more with you. Is that go at all times? You make a great point in the paper about basically no degrees or credentials are needed to get hired as a frontline caregiver. They're like and they're the ones that are there every day with your loved ones. So that's why you want to check what the staffing is and how they staff the what professionals are there, that kind of issue.
But not just the front line. It's in Georgia, to be an administrator of one of these places, the credentialing is very minimal, and that's another issue that I believe the state, at least we've heard some of the state officials are looking at, to make sure that the person who's running a facility, basically can have, more than 100 lives in their care that they're responsible for, that they have some kind of credentials as well.
Do you have any more, Brad? Let me just interrupt real quick. Do you have any more examples of that you can talk about of things to look for that should be reported to the ombudsman, to the state regulators, to the police, by loved ones that see things?
Well, yeah. I mean, the one thing that seems to happen, and it's very natural. Again, you got to look at the people. You're a loved one. You've been in crisis. I mean, you've talked to enough people and know enough people that when you have a loved one who's in need of care, you're trying to tread water to keep your head above water. You finally have found that place that you think is going to be the place that's your refuge. You want to believe that the person's going to get good care, and they are, and so you really need to, if it doesn't feel right, if they're falling, for example, let's say they have a couple falls, and all of a sudden, that's not just, yes, frail people will fall, but if the person's having multiple falls, that's not just, that's potentially a care issue, that they're not providing the care or don't have the staffing levels to adequately care for the person. So don't just write stuff off as, oh, that's Alzheimer's or that's dementia. If your loved one is complaining, or if there's an issue that they're raising, it's easy to, or if you see a staffing level problem, if we just had a case in a
Can we hold on? We're about
Sunday.
we need to take our third break here.
Yeah.
But let's go back to that, because you're hitting the point. Listen to what people are saying, and and try to help. These are your loved ones here. So with that, we're going to take our third break here, and we'll be back for our fourth segment in a few minutes.
Last week, my party chief said he wanted to go someplace he had never been before. So, I took him to the rear property line. Sound familiar? Are you tired of trudging all the way to the back of property lines? Why not take the steps to become a crew chief instead? Or even better, why not become a professional land surveyor and see your name stamped on that final survey? The Nettleman Institute of Land Surveying Engineering Technology is your next step. At NICET, we believe you are the future of surveying, and we want to do everything we can to help you succeed at becoming a professional surveyor. NYSET offers the only online one-year certificate of land surveying program that includes all books, fees, and expenses in one simple price. Visit landsurveycareer.com to stop trucking through the mud and step into your future today.
This is America's Web Radio. Would you like to have a show, talk about your business, or express your opinion on America's Web Radio? Just email gm@americaswebradio.com and we'll get back to you. Thank you.
The disease of addiction is a life-altering challenge, not just for the person suffering its effects, but also for the family and friends who support and love the one caught in its grasp. What should be the course of treatment? Who is the best person to render treatment? And what is the best place to go for the care that is needed? We know that you want answers to these and many more questions. Call 770-696-9862 and speak to a representative of the Atlanta Healing Center. They can tailor a program specifically designed to address the needs of the person suffering with an addiction, or give you guidance as to where that help may be found. Information is the key, and the trained staff at AHC is here to assist. If you wish, you can also get more information on the website located at www.atlantahealingcenter.com.
You're listening to America's Web Radio on the AmericasBroadcastNetwork.com. Thank you for listening.
Well, welcome back to the final segment of the Safe Senior Hour. And remember, our as we always tried to lead off, elder abuse doesn't report itself. And we're honored today to have investigative reporter from the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, Brad Schrade. And Brad, thanks for taking the time to be with us and help educating our listeners. As we go into our last segment here, I do want an area I would like you to go into, and it's something in your last article, actually came out this Sunday, but it talks about opening the books of some of these companies. They're here and then they go out of business, or they make all these promises and they can't. Then their funding runs out. What have you found, and what have you found of what state regulators around the country are doing?
Well, we our story that published on the front page just yesterday, Sunday, and you can find it at ajc.com/unprotected. We took a look at the business investment side of this senior care industry, and what we found was that this has, in the last 10 years, this has become a big real estate play where money from all over the country and really the world is pouring into Georgia and other states, and Georgia became very overbuilt. Particularly Metro Atlanta became very overbuilt. This great anticipation of the baby boomers, this wave of baby boomers that were coming. A lot of speculators moved in, and there was kind of a gold rush mentality that led to many of these facilities getting built, and some of them running into financial troubles. And so the state of Georgia, there's no requirements by regulators in Georgia for a facility or an operator to demonstrate that they have the financial wherewithal to adequately run the facility. Some states do require disclosure. But getting back to, so we found that, in about 20% or more, a little more than 20% of the facilities in Georgia have operators or owners who've run into financial problems. That could be bankruptcy, the corporate liens against the, facility, or just bonds, they're not making the bond payments, or just some kind of financial stress. And in some cases that impacted care. We highlight, and this gets back to the earlier segment, we highlight the case of Eula Green and her family. She was a 90-year-old widow in Stockbridge area here in Metro Atlanta, she was at one facility, but her Alzheimer's was getting more pronounced, and she needed more care. And the family looked for a special memory care facility. They found one, Autumn Leaves, down in Stockbridge. When you go into a facility, if the population, if it's like less than half full, that might raise a red flag to you that, hey, maybe it looks nice, but maybe they're having trouble filling it up, and maybe that could lead to them taking people that either not having the staff or just not having being in financial stress. So the family moved her in, and yes, she did have a number of falls, and then the family even, in February 2017, the family even heard from staff saying, "You're here all the time. Can you please tell management that that we don't have enough people. We don't have enough staff to care." One night, just a week or two later after that, a caregiver, according to the family, was tending her late at night, that she was moving around, that the put her in a kitchen chair, and then the caregiver went to care for the other 15 or 20 people on the wing, and she came back, got sidetracked with some other duties, and came back and found green on the floor in a pool of blood, and she had fallen and hit her head, and she died just a few days later. The family is suing the company that is now actually in bankruptcy because they had overbuilt these and gotten beyond what they could financially hold, and the family is suing for basically not providing the care that they needed to. So this again is you're going into it thinking these are caregivers. You also have to be aware this is a real estate, in many cases, real estate investment, and you've got to kick the tires and make sure that the facility is equipped to care for your loved one.
Right.
Don't go into it just thinking there's a lot of money behind this. This is a big investment. There's all kinds of investors pouring money in, and these companies have promised a certain return on the investment, and if it's not happening, that can create financial stresses for the company.
And again, I'd like to, I think everybody realize these homes have to be licensed. Now, so that's why the states are getting involved in the licensing and the regulations of them. But
some states have recognized that financial health does translate to care. If a place is financially healthy, they have a better chance of providing good care. If they're under financial stress, that's something that the public and regulators need to know about. And there are some states that require a facility to notify them if they're in financial stress. There's some states that require a facility to demonstrate before they can get licensed that they have the financial wherewithal to carry out this operation. In Georgia, that doesn't exist, and that's another element of how the public is in the dark here.
Right. As to our listeners around the United States, I see where Florida requires applicants to disclose anticipated revenues and expenditures. Then in Louisiana, Tennessee, Virginia, and West Virginia has some disclosure. Oregon and California have requirements for homes to notify both regulators and residents about events signifying financial distress. And Kansas is among the latest to enact the law that people who are applying for licenses for assisted living facilities and other senior care provide detailed projected budgets. And that's just some of the ones that you found. So listeners out there, check with your states. That might be another area to look at, is what kind of disclosure, or do the states even look at it before they grant a license?
Joe, I don't want to leave your listeners with the idea that this is all bad. The point to our series is to point out that you need to go into this with eyes wide open, armed with information, and armed to know that what to look for as you select a facility that is, going to ultimately be responsible for making sure your loved one gets the care they need.
Right, and I want to. In fact, you're reading you're reading my notes here, but I have that. Remember that the majority of these homes are fine homes, but you're looking at, I think you said 20%, maybe a little more, have some issues. But I wouldn't want to be the one to put my loved one in a place that has an issue that I could have anticipated, or if I did my due diligence, I would have found out maybe not there, but over here.
The problem, though, again, in Georgia, and I'm sure it's the case in other states, oftentimes there's not the information that the public needs. So you really have to be vigilant and dig for that information. You know, there are services out there that say that market themselves as, you know, average, that they'll help you find a place and they'll help you locate a place. And it's all free. Well, yes and no. I mean, they're like some of these places, the first month, if they place somebody in a facility, that first month's rent can go, they get paid the first month's rent. So, you know, it's a big business. These are big business operations, and the public just needs to, and the other big thing is these are all state regulated. There's no federal regulations that oversee any of this. Unlike nursing homes where Medicare, Medicaid, there's much more oversight. These are all private pay. It's kind of a consumer. You're on your own to sort of figure this out, and you're paying it all out of your pocket, and the market will, the market is kind of there. But you really need the information, and I'll just give one more plug, ajc.com/unprotected. We have a wealth of information, particularly if you're in Georgia, but there's also general information about questions to ask, things to look for, and a lot of this can apply in other places. And our whole goal was to try to educate the public and bring awareness to what is a very fast-growing industry that a lot of seniors are turning to for care.
I hope you continue your investigative efforts, because it really does help in educating the public. It is certainly significant, and I have found in conversations with people in other states that media outlets have been taking the time to go and investigate, like you all, this topic, and are looking at it. You know, and that's what we've tried to do here on the Safe Senior Hour. But with that, we're going to have to call it a day. And Brad, I want to thank you very much for appearing, and I hope you and your associates will come on again. And please keep up the articles. And with that, we're going to end it. And remember, elder abuse doesn't report itself.
Thank you, Joe.
You're listening to America's Web Radio on the AmericasBroadcastNetwork.com. Thank you for listening.